Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Megalopolis design. I'm John Foster. I am the director of Microsoft Platforms at BP, which covers things like SharePoint. My new favorite word, I don't know if you all heard at this conference or not, but Power Platforms. This guy, Power Platforms, and also Azure. This is my peer, Mr. John Mayo.
Yep, I'm John Mayo, Microsoft Platform Chief Architect within BP.
So just to give you a little bit of history, a little bit of information about BP. So BP has 74,000 employees. We're in 70 different countries. We are an end-to-end petroleum company. What that means is we go do production, we go do exploration in our upstream business. We explore, we produce hydrocarbons. We get those out of the ground, then we take them to our downstream part of our business where we refine them, we market them, we turn them into other products. We sell them at gas stations. And then we have a whole slew of services around, actually I'm supposed to be on this slide, there. We have a whole set of services around trading, HR, shipping, legal, tax, all the things that make the business work together. So who all out there is going through a transformation journey, modernizing IT? Anyone? We are. It's two, right? So we're out there trying to, we call it our ITNS vision, 2020 vision. So we're out there trying to be a more agile company. We're trying to simplify our operations. We're working to exit our physical data centers. And at the same time, we're developing a culture of explore, think, and do. So explore, think, and do is really trying to get us into that more agile state. So who all here is new to Azure? A few? People, how many have been in Azure for a while? How many are that we're just in between you and a hangover? Right between there, all right, a couple. So we understand. So we're going to try to keep it a little lively. So we started this journey several years ago. And I've talked to many people, and it sounds like our journey is very similar to other people. So we took our on-premise practices, lifted them up, took them over into the cloud, and it works, right? It's not the most efficient way. It's not the best way to do it, but it does work. And over time, we learned some better way. We made a lot of mistakes. We're hoping to share those mistakes with you guys today so that you can learn from them and don't have to take the exact same journey that we did. So some of the things that we started out with bringing our traditional data center model. We had had 3 separate subscriptions, literally 3 separate subscriptions, where because that's the way our organization was done. We had people who were in charge of infrastructure, so we created a subscription for them to do IaaS. We had another part of the organization that had databases, so we created a subscription for them to do databases. And then we had this new thing that we didn't know what it was, PaaS. And so we thought, we'll put all those in there, and we'll just make a subscription for those guys. That caused us, as you probably could imagine, caused us a lot of problems. We had problems with applications that had infrastructure and databases and PaaS trying to talk to each other and trying to work together. We also put a lot of manual processes in place. We had a lot of security checks in place and process and procedure, which just slowed everything down, which made people really happy, right? So we had project managers who were like, yes, please make me slower. That would be awesome. And so we decided, and we had a part of our organization, the different pieces of our organization, we were just new to cloud. We didn't know what to do. We weren't well aligned. We really had a position of the cloud as scary and dangerous. And so we're going to put up as many barriers as we possibly can to protect us from the cloud. So that lasted until about the middle of last year, when we just kind of hit a breaking point, that the reason we're going to cloud is to be faster, more agile, be able to empower people more, be able to deliver better services. And so we had a meeting, a big partnership with Microsoft, where we spent a couple of months in the last quarter of 2017, And we even took 2 weeks of time, carved that out, and locked ourselves in a room with Microsoft and told them what we wanted, right? We wanted to be able to be agile. We wanted to use the cloud-native tools. We wanted to be able to tie back into our BP1 domain. We wanted to be able to, and automation, automation, automation is our mantra. We don't want to be in our own way anymore. We want to get out of the way. How do we enable that? Microsoft worked with us to be able to help align our organizations better. We worked with our networking team. We worked with our Active Directory teams. We worked with our development teams. And through all of that, we really kind of came up with a very concise, clear way of how we wanted to engage in the cloud. We developed this model over here. So this model, what this model does is each one of those circles is a subscription. The subscription in the middle is for all of our network connectivity, all of our security. It's architected there to be able to protect everything that attaches to it from the center. And John's going to go over this in much more technical speak, in much more detail in just a few minutes. But the spokes, I said I wasn't going to say that word, the subscriptions that go around the center subscription, we are able to give those out to different projects, portfolio groups. We try to keep them at a portfolio level so that there's a range of applications there. Inside of a portfolio, we have our different resource groups, and the resource groups are where applications sit. And using this new model, we can use RBAC, we can manage all the security, we can empower people to create their own databases, create their own virtual machines, take advantage of the different cloud services that they want to stitch an application together. And they don't have to talk between subscription to subscription like we used to. We also developed, you'll notice those are different colors. We have pioneers, settlers, and town planners. And those are our different personas of our spokes. Pioneers aren't attached to BP1, but you kind of have wide open space. As you move into settler, you have wide open space. You have wide open access to all of the services that Azure has, Azure provides. But since you're not connected back to BP1, there's no risk to BP. And then as you move into settler, there's some more, everything is policy driven, so we use policies to make it where we can use, there are services that are approved, and then there are services that are in an audit feature. It is the responsibility of the owner of that settler subscription to be able to make sure that those do get vetted through architecture and through digital security. And then you have town planners. So the town planner is everything has been vetted. All of the town planner services exist in a settler, but not all the settler services exist in a town planner. As those get vetted through digital security and architecture, those services will move down to town planner and be available to everyone. That's kind of how we have that range of a sandbox being able to play, true DevOps mode, and then by having people who need to have some more central services done for them. And all of this is managed by our Azure Product Council. So you'll see up here in the top corner that we have members of the business. So we have members of our upstream, downstream, and functions all sitting inside there. Most of them are architecture people. We also have Microsoft at the table. So none of what you see today would not have been possible without a huge investment in time from Microsoft to come to us and offer people, bring their CAT teams, their customer advisory team, thank you, bringing them to us, having them spend time with us. They spent time with us for those 2 weeks back in November, December of last year, and they have been spending time with us consistently ever since. But what that council does is it brings from a business side, it tells us what projects are coming. It tells us what services, what kind of technologies they need, what things are coming down the pipeline to us. And the longer we get visibility down that pipe, the better. And then Microsoft, having them at the table, allows us to see down that same visibility into their pipeline. So many times we might have a project that says, hey, I need some VMs because I need to buy this software and use that and install that on these VMs. And Microsoft may know something that we don't, to be able to say, if you can delay that 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, then we'll be able to provide you with a service that does that. And you'll have much more resiliency, you'll have much more greater flexibility, elasticity, and you won't have to worry about virtual machines. And so that council really helps us work together to keep current in the services that we offer. So at this point, this is kind of the high-level view. John's going to dive down into some more of the details around the 7 layers of the Megalopolis architecture. So I'll hand that over to you.
It's that one.
It's that one, yes, sir.
Okay, so I know everyone's thinking, oh my God, this drawing's probably way complicated. But the way to look at it is, John and I went to this little speaker training session, so we were like, so what I came out of it with is that you should like associate things to food, and you should number things. So what this is going to be is a 7-layer cake. So in those layers, we have kind of vanilla, strawberry, chocolate ice cream, and some other great stuff. So the first layer in the upper left-hand area, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide, but it's just to kind of give you a quick overview of what it looks like, what the architecture looks like. So at the top level, we have provisioning. So we provision resource groups, we provision subscriptions. We're using ServiceNow to do that. There's a lot of other things that happen as part of that provisioning process, which I'll get to in later slides. The layer 2, in retrospect, I kind of wish I called it governance, but I called it Azure Resource Management. But that's where we actually are using Microsoft management groups. We've created a hierarchy that is similar to the hierarchy that we're using in ServiceNow. We're attaching our subscriptions into that hierarchy. We've created policies associated with the different types of subscriptions that John mentioned, the Pioneer Settler Town Planner, which I'll describe a little bit more later. The layer 3 is kind of our resiliency layer. There's more to it than what's on this slide. You know, I think you probably have been to some sessions where they've talked about availability sets, zones, Azure Site Recovery, recovery services vaults, et cetera. So all of those types of things would be in the resiliency, and probably traditional approaches where you have paired regions and you want to have it fail over between those paired regions. The next layer, which is layer 4, is more around operations. Missing up there is probably operational management suite, log analytics. There's VM diagnostics service logging. The 5th layer is like a development layer where we have our build pipeline. So we're using Visual Studio Team Services to do that. And I'll talk a little bit more about what we're doing in that space. And then the 6th layer, is the network layer. And so that's probably the most complicated piece there, but that's a hub. So when John was showing the flower picture, the center of that is a hub. It has some network virtual appliances. We happen to be using Barracuda devices. We might change that after this conference, but right now we're using Barracuda devices to manage our network traffic in and out of the hub. We have express route connectivity back into our mega data centers. We are using, I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but application service environments for our apps, our web apps. And so we're primarily creating a VNet peering between those spokes at the top, or the subscriptions at the top. One is called Town Planner, one's a Settler. So those are just 2 of the personas that we've created for our subscriptions. I'm going to kind of describe the personas a little bit later. And then the last piece of it, which kind of was key, was that we moved, we used to have a cloud domain, called it CD1. So that's where we're connecting our resources to, VMs, et cetera. But we decided to move to using our BP1 Active Directory, which was a fantastic move, because what it did was it helped us accelerate the migration of applications from on-premises to the cloud without having to change domains. So it was kind of a key design decision that we made and agreed with Microsoft. So a lot of the stuff that you see on the slide, when we first started it, and even probably some of it today, is in private preview. Some of it's getting released, like management groups are getting released, policies are getting released. And so we had a partnership with Microsoft, provided them feedback as we were using these new features. And it was kind of a two-way street. And so I think it was a good journey for us, because we didn't want to just say, oh, everything we're going to use is GA, which was happening prior to December of last year. And we decided that we should take some risk and actually use non-GA capabilities in Azure, and that way we can actually further our partnership with Microsoft so that we can give them input, they can give us guidance on how to use it, and it's been a pretty successful approach. So that's my 7-layer cake. So if you walk away from here, your long-term memory is supposed to remember a 7-layer cake. Okay, so now this diagram is probably a lot easier to digest. So if we move from left to right, we have spoke provisioning, we have resource group provisioning, we have service consumption, and we have security and compliance monitoring. Now, what I'm gonna do in the subsequent slides is I'm gonna kind of take each one of these separately, and we're gonna talk about each one of these. So this is just a high-level overview. So, get my notes too. Sorry, my memory isn't as good as it used to be. So on this slide, the primary focus here is what we're doing in the ServiceNow area. This thing doesn't really work. Or did I just change slides?
Just change.
Yeah, so the ServiceNow area is where we are actually doing provisioning of subscriptions and of resource groups. But there's a lot more to it than that. So when we move to a portfolio-centric, app-centric design, this is one of the things that we kind of honed in on, was how do we actually provision subscriptions. We used the Azure API and management groups to do that, to orchestrate the automation of the subscriptions, the provisioning of subscriptions. So, and our organization also made a change, right? So part of our ITNS 2020 vision was to move to portfolio owners. Portfolio owners would manage applications. Applications would be within resource groups. They owned it. It was their responsibility to do the development and the ops. And so we set up DevOps teams for each one of those portfolios. So it was not only a design aspect of what we delivered, but it was also an organizational change on our part to get to that. So the portfolio owners are the ones that create the subscription. They're the ones that manage the subscription, the cost, everything. The key thing here is that the portfolio owner assigns spoke admins and what we call CE delegates, which I thought I changed the names, but those would be resource group delegates. In BP, we call them cloud environments, but in Azure, it's called resource groups. And so what a spoke admin does is he or she has the capability of managing, network security groups, managing the subnet, managing ARM templates that are being used in his portfolio, his or her portfolio. They can also create resource groups. They can assign DevOps teams to those resource groups. They manage the JML process, joiner, movers, leavers process within that resource group. And they also have access to all the resource groups. So spoke admin's a pretty key role in this whole design. They have quite a bit of span. We don't expect a portfolio owner to actually have the technical skill set to be a spoke admin, so they should be assign spoke admins that have that technical skill set in Azure. And part of what's not shown in this picture is kind of what we have a team that John and I kind of co-manage called Microsoft Azure Platform Services, MAPS. So if I say MAPS, that's just our team that is a DevOps team that is building out the platform. Now, we're not building applications, we're building out the platform, so it's a distinction. So portfolio owners build out apps, we build out the platform. So the MAPS team, what they were responsible for is basically working with the Azure API, making sure that the provisioning of the subscriptions were automated. They worked on the RBAC model. I'll talk a little bit more about the RBAC model later. And they also worked on the Active Directory structure, which when we deploy a subscription, it gets an OU container associated with it. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. They do the VNet peering between the subscriptions. So that picture where at the beginning I kind of had VNet peerings to the personas. And they do a few other things, like manage the VSTS extensions and the ARM templates, which I'll also get into that in a little bit. So just to kind of get into Azure, so now I kind of talked about this top part of it. The very top part of it, there's a separate deep dive slide on that. The bottom part of it is where we get into the PST is the personas for pioneers, settlers, and town planners. And so just to give you kind of a different view or flavor of what that means. So pioneers, they're not connected to the network. They don't have any ADA connectivity. They have all services available. They can invent, they can innovate, they can create whatever applications they want to in those subscriptions. There are policies associated with those subscriptions, but they're basically isolated from the rest of BP. And we did that because we wanted to give the teams, so we kind of stepped back and said, okay, well, our personas today are IaaS, PaaS, and DBaaS, or databases. Well, those really aren't personas. So we tried to figure out what our customers are actually doing. And so part of what we knew they were doing is they wanted to do pioneer. They wanted to go innovate. They wanted to go invent. So the next kind of group of people that we identified were settlers, or settlers. I probably say that's funny from Ohio. So the settlers, the primary difference there is around policies. So we have implemented services that have gone through the approval process from digital security or from our security team and from our architecture team. And what I mean by that is that the policies that have been created for those services are actually controlling different aspects of those services. So when we analyze a service, we try to see how can we actually protect it. Should it be using HTTPS? Should it not be introducing public IPs? There's various aspects. There's other parts around domain joining. We want to protect the domain join account. We need to use a runbook to do that. So we have different policies that do different things. On VMs in particular, there's a lot of policies where we're putting on the OMS agent, we're putting on the backup agent, we're putting on anti-malware, we're putting on CrowdStrike, which is a tool that we're using, looking at trying to replace that with like anti-threat protection from Microsoft eventually. But we have about 150 policies overall. And so with the settler, what we decided is that, okay, well, here's the policies that you have available to you. And if you want to use the rest of the policies, we built a VSTS extension that allows you at the resource group level to take exception to the deny policies that we have set on the services that are unavailable. And so if a DevOps team comes to us and says, we want to, and that DevOps team means resource group, they want to exclude a certain set of policies that will allow them to use services that aren't currently available. We have an extension that does that, and why we do an extension is because we have a workflow. And that workflow then triggers an engagement with our security team and an architecture team. So then we can analyze, how, if we enable those services, which we will, what policies do we actually need to put in place for monitoring and security moving forward. And then, once that's approved, we would then add it to our list of approved set of services. So town planners, the third persona, has all of the services, has all the approved services available. And so it's like a continuum moving from pioneer, settler to town planner. And so what the goal eventually is to get all the services approved. We never think settler is going to go away, just a bet, because we believe Microsoft will continue to introduce new services. And so we will need a settler just so we can continue this process of trying to make sure that we set the right policies, get the monitoring correct. It's a continuous improvement cycle, but it is a continuum of enabling services. And what did I forget about that? Okay, so so then you're thinking, okay, well, so now you got pioneer, settlers, and town planners. There's different policies for each one of those. how do we keep all this organized? So we have about 150 policies. I think I might have already said that. We have 25% of them sitting at the root level, which I'll explain in a second. And those policies would be things like we want to make sure that everyone's using HTTPS for web applications, for mobile applications, for blob storage. We want to deny public IP addresses. We want to make sure people are using managed disk, et cetera. So those are the types of things that are at the root level. And then through this hierarchy that we've created of divisions, domains, portfolios, and services, what we do is at the portfolio level, we create three management groups. And those three management groups are our personas. And so when we provision a subscription, one of the things we ask is, what type of subscription do you want? And then it provisions into that persona. And what that does is then propagates the policies down from that persona, that management group, into the subscription. And then the policies that are at the root level, those will also propagate down. I know I'm going really fast. Any questions or concerns? Are you lost? Do you like this? Come on back there. Yeah, I can.
You want me to take it, or you all right?
You can take it.
Okay. So I don't know if I'm allowed to say this word here, but we used to have our cloud. We have two cloud providers, AWS and Azure. So I won't say AWS again. We made a decision in BP to separate those teams and so that we could focus more on the cloud native services versus trying to come up with a generic wrapper that would sit over the top of them. And so in January, that decision was made, and by the end of February, we had separated the teams, finished our MOC, and taken on the group. From that point on, we've stayed about 35 people, right about 35 people, and we developed
4 squads.
Yeah, that's right. So we have 4 squads. It's an agile team, and we use VSTS to do all of that. We have our product backlog. We prioritize those. That Azure Product Council helps us with that now. When we first started out, we just used. We knew what we needed to build to be able to get the skeleton of the Megalopolis built, and so we just focused on delivering those things and prioritized those. Had the 4 squads work on those. Are we still at 4 squads now? I think we're down to. We're down to 2-ish.
Depends on who you ask.
Okay. And so tried to streamline that a little bit more, trying to make the teams a little bit more autonomous in their ability to deliver what needs to be done. We delivered the skeleton of this in 33 working days. That doesn't take into account there was an Easter holiday in there and a Good Friday and some things like that when people weren't in. We continue to build on it, add flesh to it, meat to the bone to be able to get it there. But that's since kind of February 26th, I think it was our first day to start up with the team. And by the first part of April, we demoed some of the features that you have here. Our team is located primarily in the UK. We use 2 different vendors that provide services there. They do a fantastic job of working together as a blended team. And it's led by BP badged people. All the leadership roles are in BP badged. And we're looking to mix that up a little bit as we go forward and bring some more of that in-house, but still keeping some of it outsourced. Did that answer? So the team is still good size, but we made the decision to split them up into different squads, so that we started out with 4 squads, and then we've kind of merged those. It depends on who you ask, down to 2, to really keep them more agile. And we do everything. So we do all the networking things. We do the infrastructure, doing all the ARM coding, making sure that all of those pieces, all those components work together. We do ARM templates. We also do, inside VSTS, we also have just tools that you can use to to build the infrastructure that you need. So you can do it using the tools, or you can do everything built via code.
Okay, so I think.
Yep.
Yes. So, yeah, so when we were showing the management groups, we had hierarchies. One of the hierarchies was a portfolio. And so what we do is we attach the subscription to that hierarchy and to that portfolio. And so in that way, we can actually kind of organize. We have about 150 subscriptions right now, and so we can organize it across all of BP by using that hierarchy. So we know what subscriptions belong to downstream, we know what subscriptions belong to upstream, we know what subscriptions belong to trading, to functions. So by doing that organization, it really helps us to understand who's doing what type of subscriptions are using, and we've also got like a naming convention, stuff like that, that helps us identify which portfolio that subscription belongs to.
And all of that ties back into ServiceNow, which gets into our CMDB, and so we're able to identify what applications are impacted by certain events based on whether it's a network issue or something like that. So all that ties together.
Yes. Naming convention does tie into it. So, and I'm sorry, I can see we're going to run out of time. So the next area is kind of resource group provisioning, spelled group wrong. So that's through ServiceNow. I guess one of the key things there is that we're doing tagging at the resource group level. There's a limit of 15 tags, but what that allows us to do is do our cost allocation. So we have a cost code associated with that tagging, and then that we're using a tool to actually allocate costs back to the business or directly charged to the business. We also have the security engagement ID. So if there is a security engagement where they've requested new services, then we actually have an internal system where they raise an engagement with the security team in order for them to get involved in doing the analysis. The other key pieces of those tags is there's a spoke subscription OU, meaning Active Directory container. There's also a resource group container, and I'll get into that in a little bit. We also have, I'm going to try to speed up a little bit because we're running out of time. But then we also have what we call MAPS core resource groups, which there's 10 of them, and they're specifically devoted to the MAPS platform team. Anything above 10, 11, or above are customer resource groups. And so some of the reasons why we have a MAPS core set of resource groups is, for one, we have like a resource group that does the VNet peering. And it's where all the subnets get placed, it's where the UDRs get placed, network security groups. So it's all managed in that one resource group. The other resource groups, for example, we're using the application service environment, which I probably won't get into, but it's essentially app services, but it is a tenant environment, meaning that we don't manage it, but there's an underlying infrastructure that's devoted completely to us versus using the public app services environment, and it's all on private IP, which we found to be attractive. Then we have other groups in that core set of management groups for like build servers and things like that. Because we're using private IPs, we need to have a place where we can put a build server. And part of this is the VSTS pipeline. So we actually provision through Snow. We provision a project in VSTS that's related to that resource group, and that provisioning process then allows the DevOps teams to actually deploy from VSTS, from their project, directly into that particular resource group. So there's a tie of who can actually deploy into that resource group. So it has to be, the project has to have service endpoints associated to it so that it can deploy directly into the resource group. So I went through that fast, but think just to kind of continue the journey. So that didn't change that. So the next area is the RBAC model and directory services. So one of the key things here that we did is we switched from our resource domain to our BP Active Directory. And that truly, like I said, we've gotten lots of feedback from migration teams that they're able to accelerate their migrations from on-premises into the cloud. So, and any modern application would use Azure AD, so Azure AD is also associated to this. What we did is an extensible AD structure, so if we want to move, so the hub and the subscription, the spoke, we can call it that, let's just call it that, are at the same level in the Active Directory structure. And so what that means is that if we want to create another hub in another region, then we can actually take subscriptions that are associated with, let's say, the spoke over here. We can say, oh, well, 6 of those should be associated to this region over here. And all we have to do is to redo the VNet peering, which is nothing compared to anything else. So the Active Directory structure stays the same. It's just a matter of us doing another VNet peering. And so we've kind of got some of that where we're using certain regions, but we find that East US 2 and West US seem to have a lot of capabilities in them that we would like to use, but we're not in those particular regions. The GPOs, so we also are using group policies. So we have group policies for workstations and for servers. Because of the way we've designed this, the GPOs get applied at both the spoke level, the subscription level. They also get applied at the GPO level. And so what this allows us to do is kind of tailor that subscription for that particular portfolio so that they can have their own GPOs. We do have a standard set of GPOs that we push down, but those GPOs group policies can actually be modified at the resource level or at the subscription level. And so doing it this way, we kind of now have created an autonomous portfolio where they have better control of what types of GPOs get applied, and also what types of Active Directory structure that they want to have. So we don't have to stick with we came up with a design for Active Directory structure. If we want to add or modify to that Active Directory structure for a particular resource group, we can do that. So it's not like it's rigid. The RBAC model, I mean, we have a portfolio owner role, which I already talked about. We have the resource group delegate role, which isn't all, we don't have to talk about that, but there's a maps portal role, which is part of what John and my team, they're part of the maps portal, so they can do platform activities. There's a spoke admin role, which can do, like I said, do a lot of the subnets. They can do resource groups. They can manage ARM templates that are associated with their portfolio. The thing they can't do is they can't change ExpressRoute connectivity or circuits. They can't do ExpressRoute gateways. They can't do VNet peering. So we kind of protected a lot of the VNet or a lot of the network activity and left that with the platform team. And we're in the process of kind of automating all of that. So even the platform team at some point will have tools that can automate, in particular, automate like firewall rules. I mean, we can go through manual process hell trying to do firewall rule changes, but we can see how we can automate it. And then once we get it done for our team, then we'll extend it out to our end users. That's good on that one. Okay. I can hear you.
Is the on-prem Active Directory your corporate directory, or is it a dedicated cloud for it?
No, it's our on-prem corporate directory. Yeah, that was a big switch from the way that we had implemented initially. So initially, we were using a resource domain, which is only in the cloud. But we found that to be pretty difficult to work with, especially when we're moving applications from on-prem to the cloud. And then strategically, when we discussed this over with Microsoft, they said it was the right way to go, because eventually Azure AD domain services, they'll beef it up a bit. And then it'll allow us to make a switch to Active Directory domain services at some point. So we're trying to follow that strategic path, that roadmap that Microsoft has laid out for us. And that was what they told us that was the best approach. I mean, I can understand why we did the cloud domain at first from a security perspective, but now we've got so many security controls and policies in place, and we're using a SIM. We're doing all the things that probably most of you are doing to actually protect our domain controllers, to protect any of our VMs, et cetera. So on this slide, there's probably the wrong slide. On this slide, we kind of have, these are kind of the products that the Maps platform is delivering. So in the upper left-hand corner, we have ARM templates. And so we're trying to get to a point where everything that gets deployed in the cloud is using ARM. But we also realize that not everybody is proficient in ARM. So the bottom part of it is a series of VSTS extensions. And all it's really doing is giving a nice user interface on top of ARM. But we find about 75% of our users are using those extensions versus using ARM. And so they go provision VMs. A lot of teams, like we have someone out in the audience, that would use ARM. Then we have other teams that prefer the use of VSTS extension. And there's multiple extensions here. I was going to talk through some of them, but we are at the yellow light. So I'm not going to talk through many of them, but we do have, so like, let me just call out a couple. One, we have SSL certificates. This one right here. Internally, this took us 13 days. That was probably on a good day, yeah. In a good day, to get external certificates. So we worked on a tool extension using Global Sign, which is integrated into Azure platform, and now we can get certificates like in, I don't know, 30 seconds?
36 seconds.
36 seconds. So 13 days, 36 seconds. And then we have a lot of success stories like that. So the DNS registration, again, that was a process, manual process. So internally, our DNS registration, we can, they can run this extension, have the application registered within a few minutes. Externally, it takes what we did is we basically took the manual process and built it into the extension, send the emails out. So now we don't know, I don't have to go find the form. I don't have to figure out who to email it to. It actually helps me fill out the forms and sends out the right emails and helps us, kind of move that process along faster. Because that was a problem. And some of these other ones have to do with SQL Server. We've got ARM templates for SQL Server. We've got extensions for SQL Server. We've got VM provisioning. But I think those are probably two where, there's more, where we kind of had manual processes that just were awful. And so we're working on, like, for example, I said we're working on a firewall capability where we can, change firewalls. We'll probably build a VSTS extension for that, build workflow into it, get the right approvals, and have the firewall change happen. So the build pipeline, like I said, we're using VSTS. There's quite a few other things that I could cover on this slide, but I'm not going to. But like I said already, so when you provision a resource group inside of ServiceNow, it automatically creates a project in VSTS that's configurable. You can give it an endpoint. You can select a VSTS account. We kind of have organized all of our accounts into a single subscription, which if you haven't done that, you should probably do that, because that then gives you the organization of your VSTS accounts. And then you can have people, and then they give us the right privileges, the platform team the right privileges in order for us to create the projects inside of their account, and then it gets associated to that resource group, and they can easily deploy into it. So it's kind of a nice flow. And we're finding that, the whole deployment process is a lot easier when we've actually provisioned the site, the project folder, and actually have the DevOps teams use the project folders that's been provisioned through Snow. The last piece here, if I can get to the last piece. And I may have skipped a bunch of stuff on that other slide, but we're now down to 6 seconds. Or no, we're over 6 seconds, okay. So this is security, compliance, and monitoring. So this is key. So all the policies that we've been talking about, they all feed into Azure Security Center. So now we can see that the new subscriptions that we've created in our new model, we've reached 94% compliance. And that all has to do with the use of policies. And so you can also, if you're in Jeremy Winter's session, you can now click on these policies and it'll help you remediate any non-compliant items. And so it's pretty cool. That you can also turn on auditing for certain activities that you want to make sure that you're auditing that's happening inside of your subscriptions. The monitoring and patching was really kind of a game changer. We were using System Center in our old model, which sucked. It's a great tool, but so I think what Jeremy's team has been doing is trying to take that platform and then putting it into the cloud using Log Analytics, Operational Management Suite, Azure Monitor. So there's several pieces to it that they're really trying to kind of bring it all together. But it was a great day when we were able to stop using SCOM, we were stopping using SCCM, and we were actually doing provisioning using Service Manager. So we stopped doing all of that. So none of that happens anymore. And John's happy too, because now it doesn't cost him anything. And then the reporting, there's utilization reports. We do use Cloud9, and from what I saw earlier today, we probably will start using Cloud9 more. But we're also using Cloudability, so just to let you know. And I guess that was probably a whirlwind tour of that particular slide. So the last area is key success factors.
Yeah, so we won't spend much time on here, but really, I think the thing that was most helpful to us was the getting with Microsoft, and getting some of their expertise, the partnership that we built together with Microsoft in doing that. And I really, if I leave you with anything, making sure getting out of the large monolithic subscriptions, getting into small subscriptions, really using policies, making it where you have some of that connectivity back into your own network with security centralized, and also applying with policies so that you don't have to keep applying that over and over again. And then in Jeremy's meeting today, we also learned about blueprints, and there's some space that you could leverage those blueprints here as well. Really empowering the people to manage their own. Within BP, we had a lot of people. When we were on-premise, it was easy for the app team to blame the network team, to blame the infrastructure team, to blame the AD team, to blame the backup guys. But now that it's all in a single subscription, it's all you, right? It's all the app owner, and the app owner now owns it from soup to nuts, and is there to be able to deliver those services and in charge of being able to deliver those services. I don't know, do we have a slide that tells about us? No. I'm going to give your email address, and I haven't even asked if I'm going to be able to do that or not. So if you want to be able to contact us, john.mayo@bp.com, john.foster@bp.com. If you work in cloud and BP, you have to be named John. It's just a requirement.
Makes it easier.
I don't know if we're way past our time. John and I are more than happy to stay after and answer questions if you guys have them individually. I don't know if we can stay in here or not, or if we have to go outside to do that, but we're more than happy to do whatever it takes for that. So now we are officially not between you and a hangover, or at least the bar, and really appreciate you guys coming to listen to us talk.